And now we'll be moving on to the third panel session of the day. As we've seen throughout the day, the central question that the Negative Emissions Summit is addressing this year is how can we create scalable and credible demand for permanent carbon removals? And each panel addresses this central challenge from a different perspective. And so this third discussion will focus on the industrial dimension of demand creation. And specifically, it's going to look at how we can integrate permanent carbon removals into hard-to-abate sectors. And in doing so, the discussion aims to reframe CDR from a standalone policy challenge to an opportunity to create value across a wide variety of existing industries. And guiding this discussion will be our moderator, Mike Scott, who is an award-winning journalist who has been writing on climate and business issues for more than 20 years. For such publications as the Financial Times, Reuters, Sustainable Business, and Bloomberg. So please join me in welcoming our moderator, Mike Scott.
Hi, everyone. First of all, I need to apologize for the picture. It's very old. Allow me to introduce our panel. So first we have Jannicke Gerner Bjerkås, the Director for CCS and Carbon Markets at Hafslund Celsio. Next is Michel Schenker, the Innovation and Technical Marketing Manager at Omya. Then Lisa Braune, Head of CDR at Neustark. We have Rasha Abdrabu from UNIDO, where she is the Industrial Development Officer of Energy Systems and Industrial Decarbonisation. And enter stage left, Tibor Siering, an expert on industrial decarbonisation and climate strategy at dena, the German energy agency. So we are kind of the anti-biochar. This is all about CDR and industry. So, but just before we start, because this is not my world, so perhaps you can each explain to me very briefly what you and your organisation do and how it relates to CDR. So we'll start with you, Tibor.
Sure. Thank you to be here. Hello, everyone. I'm Tibor Siering. I work with the German energy agency. We advise the German government on carbon management strategy. So on the one hand, that is CCUS, on the other hand, CDR. We do all sorts of things, policy-related advice, technical expertise. And I should add that we are not the German government, so we're an independent organization. So I can't speak on behalf of the German government.
Hi, my name is Lisa. Thank you so much for having me. I'm working for Neustark. We are a Swiss project developer. We work together with existing industries, the industry of mineral waste recycling and biogas production to produce CDR. It's really an end-to-end solution that we provide. So it's from providing the technology to store the CO2, as well as the sourcing of the CO2, the transportation, MRV, certification, and then also CDR sales. So our partners don't need to care about anything. They just need to ensure that they store the CO2.
Okay, Michel.
Thank you, Lisa. My name is Michel. You can hear me. I'm working for Omya. Omya is a leading mineral supplier globally, producing natural minerals like calcium carbonate and others. But also, on the other hand, is a supplier for, or a distributor for specialty materials like specialty chemicals. In my role, I try to gather all ideas, projects, concepts that are developed within the company, for instance, coming from the research departments that we have, and try to get them into something the company can sell, like a service or a product or an application. And the current focus of our work is to identify CDR or CCS pathways where our products, services, and applications can make a difference and can easily be implemented for customers or partners in their operations.
Jannicke?
Yes. So I work with Hafslund Celsio in Oslo, which is an energy company. And we have a large waste incineration plant that is also the base load into our district heating system in Oslo. And we are establishing a carbon capture and storage plant at that waste to energy facility. We will be capturing about 350,000 tons of CO2 per year, and about 50% of that is biogenic. And by doing this project, we are actually transforming this plant from being the biggest emission point of the city of Oslo to being the largest carbon sink in Norway. And we will start operations in 2029.
And Rasha?
So I'm working at the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, at the Energy Climate Action Industrial Decarbonization Unit. We support our member states in sustainable industrial development. Specifically, my division, we work on meeting net zero targets, industry decarbonization, and decarbonization targets through enabling environments, working with governments in policy, standards, incentives, and also on technology. Good things about UNIDO is we're technology agnostic, so we support the technology that is best for the country and they wish to support. And then also we support on the exchange and knowledge and capacity building across the globe.
Great, thank you all for that. And Rasha, where are we now with CDR? Can you just give us a very quick overview of the current state of the market? How many projects are there? What sectors are they in? And where in the world are they?
Currently, we're at early stages of the market, but it's growing rapidly. It's approximately valued at $2 billion USD, and it's expected to grow to 50 million billion by 2030. There is 27 plants of direct air capture, but it's all at early demonstration, with only 3 currently with capacity of 1,000 tons of CO2 per year and over. There is leading countries like the US with leading on deployment and leading in policies that support, but also Canada, UK, Norway, and also there is emerging activities in the global south like in Kenya. Industrial integration is best or mostly seen in cement and concrete, also on steel and in bioenergy.
Thank you. And Tibor, from a European point of view, is that the essential sort of state that we're in, that it's still very early stages, or are things more developed here?
But I think generally that's right. We're still in the infancy stage also in Europe. Nevertheless, I'd say that there are some very exciting projects coming up. Jannicke just mentioned one. There is the BECS facilities in Denmark, the Ørsted projects that are supposed to start up operations this year. So that's around 400,000 tons of biogenic CO2 captured and stored. There's the Sectoral Oxygen project that's upcoming in the next years. But yeah, Jannicke, I'd say we're still in the infancy stage. There are some cement and lime projects also that have started operations. We have a minor share of biogenic CO2 that might ramp up in the future. So that's also an interesting second to look at.
Okay, great, thank you. And in terms of, so we have some people on the panel who are working on concrete examples of CDR. So I'm going to ask them just to explain how that works, the mechanics of it. So how do you integrate CDR into existing operations and value chains? And I'll start with you, Lisa.
Yes, so as mentioned, we work together with mineral waste recyclers as well as biogas producers. Mineral waste recycler recycle mineral waste such as demolition concrete, incineration bottom ash, or steel slags. And these materials, they take up significant amount of CO2. So we developed a technology which is quite simple and straightforward, which allows the recycler to store the CO2 durably, so for thousands of years in these material streams. It had to be as simple as possible so that we do not interrupt the existing processes, because otherwise it would have been very, very difficult for us to find partners to collaborate. So essentially how it works from a business perspective, we sell these storage facilities to the recycler and we then reimburse them for each ton of CO2 they store. So they really have an incentive to store as much CO2 as possible. And the reimbursement is paid through the CDR sales on the voluntary carbon market. And we also collaborate together with the biogas producers. I think there it's very straightforward incentive for them. We pay them for the liquefied CO2. So it's for both industries, it's an additional revenue stream that they are generating through the CDR component.
Great. And, Michel, you mentioned that your company is focused more on the mineral side of things. So how does it work for you?
Yes, so we come from a slightly different angle, as Mike just said, right? Primarily, not only we are looking into how to use products we already have in our portfolio, for instance, calcium carbonate, and integrate this into processes that then allow to do CDR. And one of these examples is in Germany. We demonstrated in a wastewater treatment plant using the wastewater alkalinity enhancement protocol provided by Isometric, for instance, that we can do a treatment of the wastewater, which is, on the one hand, is already in place, since many wastewater treatment plants already use calcium carbonate as a process aid to balance or buffer the pH and to increase process efficiency downstream as well. And so the material is already known, and the industry is familiar with how to use the material, knows that it's a safe material, it's an efficient material, and it is working through the principle of forming bicarbonate ions, so the CO2 that is generated in the operations transforms to hydrocarbonic acid, which is then transformed to calcium bicarbonate if sufficient calcium carbonate is present, and then downstream is stored in the ocean over long periods of time. And so this approach was demonstrated in the last year, 1.5 years. And since it was successful, it is now fully rolled out to the full plant, to the full operation, and is being implemented into the process. So there was a minimal, almost no change, since the material was already used as a baseline treatment, increasing the dosage. Since we work with the principle of additionality, we cannot claim the credits for the baseline treatment, but for everything above, and there was still capacity to dose more calcium carbonate, we can basically make it work financially also by selling credits as well to the voluntary market.
Great. And Jannicke, the headline that you just announced is really quite significant, from it being the biggest source of carbon in Oslo to becoming the biggest sink. Does that translate into sort of having to make significant changes on the ground?
Sorry, to have some.
Does the fact that you're moving from being a large emitter to a large sink of carbon to reach that stage, are you having to make lots of changes in your operations?
Well, yes and no. I mean, we run this huge waste incineration plant, which is basically treating residual waste that cannot be recycled. And this plant will run as normal. And we will then add a carbon capture plant to this process. And it's complicated because it's an old, large industrial plant, and it's quite tight at the site. And the CCS plant is large as well. And so there's quite complex integration into the plant. And there's also transport to port, because we're not situated at port. So we have to transport the CO2 by electric trucks down to the port of Oslo. So it's, but the operation of the waste incineration plant is going to run as today. And with the CDR contracts that we have signed with the Microsoft and Frontier, it's more important than ever that we have steady operations, both on the waste incineration plant and on the capture plant, to be able to deliver on these contracts.
Sure. And what happens to the the carbon that you're capturing? Are you burying it in the North Sea?
It's about 350,000 tons per year, 50% biogenic, and we will send it off into the longship value chain with the ships from the port of Oslo, and then permanently geologically stored with Northern Lights.
Great, okay. And I guess with your operation, it's a very fixed thing. Do you see other opportunities that you can get involved in terms of CDR, or is this a sort of one-shot effort?
Well, I think that the CDR contracts that we did sign, or that we have signed, was critical to have a business case for this project. It was 1 out of 3 very important financial legs to stand on. So we would never have gotten to an FID without them. We still have about 20% left to sell. We're not in a rush. We will see how the market develops and with all the things happening in the EU, etc. And we're also looking into other business opportunities. First of all, the port. We build a tank terminal at port. So we're also looking to have third-party volumes from all over southern Norway to transfer their CO2 through our facilities at port. And there's also other opportunities. As for cement, it's basically a lot of the same mechanisms when it comes to green premiums. The treatment of waste should also consider the green treatment, that you can actually deal with and eliminate the emissions from the waste handling, should also be attractive to waste processors. And that should be also included in tenders and bids, to have that green premium and to be willing to pay that extra cost to also deal with the CO2, which is a waste product in itself.
Sure, okay. And Michel, do you see other opportunities to expand beyond what you're doing at the moment?
Yes, I mean, generally speaking, every aspect or every operation that has a form of pH buffering or alkalinity enhancement, so it's not only wastewater, you can talk about ocean alkalinity enhancement, or there is river liming. Enhanced rock weathering is basically going the same direction, where you would also apply calcium carbonate or other alkaline materials to soil, right, to combat acidification of farmland. And everything is working through the same mechanisms, forming calcium bicarbonate, then being long-time stored. So, and in most of these applications, the use of alkaline materials is already established, or at least generally known to the industry. So again, implementation is usually very easy. On the MRV part, this depends a little bit. Wastewater treatment plants are optimal, of course, since the infrastructure is mostly already there to measure specific ions, pH, flow rates, and so on. For agriculture, it might be a little bit more tricky. Nevertheless, following protocols, this should be possible as well.
And Lisa, the same question to you, really. Do you see further opportunities beyond what you're already doing at the moment?
Neustark was founded in 2019, and we are a Swiss-based company, so our whole idea started out of the problem that there is no geological storage available in Switzerland. So we wanted to find another possibility on how to store CO2. So we started with these mineral waste streams, which we have all across Europe. We also have, I think now, 40 capture and storage plants across Europe. And this allowed us to gain a lot of knowledge in liquefying CO2, transporting CO2, storing it in a very safe manner, doing the MRV, the certification. And this knowledge can be applied to all the value chain. So if we look into the future, we want to expand our scope to still biogenic fluxes, but maybe also more CCS, where we also cover more fossil sources and support these emitters in storing their CO2, and they're potentially also partnering with geological storage sites, because it's just the fact that we don't have enough mineral waste to store the emissions. So we really need geological storage sites, and we see that more and more geological storage sites are opening with Northern Lights, with green sand, and hopefully many more in the future. And we just want to use our knowledge and apply it to this value chain as well.
Sure, okay. What do we think are the main challenges that the sector faces when it comes to scaling up? And Tibor, I'll start with you first.
Yeah, we're talking about integrating CDR into existing industry. We're talking about industries like cement, like lime on waste incineration. These are big plants, and that requires a lot of investment. So we're talking hundreds of millions of euros for post-capture, post-combustion capture systems. We need a physical infrastructure to transport the CO2, so that requires investment in pipelines, for example, or electric trucks. So that is very challenging. So we need to find sources for this CapEx funding. On the other side, we have obviously talked a lot today about demand. And that's the same issue also in industry. There needs to be demand for the CDR that is created. And if we scale the existing industries, if we scale CDR in existing industries, we're going to need a lot of demand. So we have to think about demand. We have to think about financing, about bankability, how to get finance streams to also smaller companies. So all of these things.
Sure. Rasha, from a UNIDO point of view, does that chime with the challenges that you're having to deal with as well?
Yes, I think I echo Tibor here on high capex, but from our side as well, in looking at the regulatory framework, that there is fragmentation, there is existing instruments, but goes in silos, whether in carbon pricing or on target. But also, I think one of our topics as well in UNIDO that we work with is standards and MRVs. The MRVs are not non-existent in a lot of countries, specifically in the global south. But also standards are built for mitigation. They're not fit for CDR and removals, and they have to be adapted in order for it. But again, all these challenges, I think it amplifies in the global south or in developing countries, because they have all these in one, combined. High capital, high investment cost, no existing, strong MRV system, and standards that's not there as well.
Sure. Okay. And from the industry point of view, are there any particular challenges that you guys are facing that you would like dealt with? Start with you, Lisa.
I think we heard it enough today, demand.
Yeah.
It's just the demand side that is missing, and with that comes also price pressure. I think with our decentralized approach, which is rather smaller scale and many sites, we often do not fit in funding schemes of the European Union, so we do not have possibilities to subsidize some of the costs we are facing. So currently we can only work with the biggest recyclers in Europe, and the small to mid-size, the economy just doesn't work with the CDR price we are seeing on the market, which is a pity because the vast majority are mid-size recyclers and there are only very few very big ones.
Right. Michel?
Yes, I guess another factor, but it was mentioned in the morning already as well, is maybe that we need some kind of stability. When we are talking about, demand is one side, but then also how much do you get for if you are depending on credits, if you are producing products, is also maybe, product costs versus price is important, and of course, if you have to justify an investment, you need something to plan with, and this only works if you have a certain security, planning security. So stability, maybe in prices or also in policies.
Sure. Anything else, Jannicke?
Well, I can add one thing. I fully agree with what you said so far. But also, I think the challenge of developing projects on different sides of the value chain is difficult. So we were lucky because we were part of Longship, so with the Norwegian states developing the full value chain in parallel. But this is a challenge that we see, that capture projects cannot get to an FID before they have a contract with a storage operator. And the operators, storage operators are basically saying the same thing. We will not make an FID until we know that the delivery is coming. So that's also a challenge to synchronize all these FIDs and all these timelines to make all the projects move forward.
Thank you for that. So let's have a look then at how CDR can create strategic and commercial value for heavy industry and move beyond being simply a regulatory obligation and a massive cost. Are there opportunities for these companies to incorporate CDR and and actually make some money out of it, or at least be cost neutral? What are the key sort of instruments and elements that can help a company to make this, at the very least, value for money? And I will start with you, Lisa.
For our partners, it's really a pure business rationale. They get an additional revenue stream for each ton of CO2 they store in the material without disrupting their value chain. So with a little change to the value chain, they get an additional revenue stream, and it's really a business case that is behind this decision. Same for the biogenic CO2 sources, but again, the whole business case relies on CDR sales, so we can only develop more projects if we also have a buyer on the other side that commits to the CDR for, I would say, at least 5 years, because otherwise the risk is just way too high to put these projects into operation.
Okay. Michel?
Yeah, I can totally agree. I mean, this is one revenue stream, and also the one, I mean, in these specific projects we are working on currently, the revenue stream is the money for the credits. Alternatively, I mean, also again, looking from a product perspective, of course, it's always a possibility to make a physical product. And since we are specialized in calcium carbonate, which contains CO2, right, as in carbonate, so in a stable form, this is possible, right? If you produce a synthetic calcium carbonate, for instance, you technically can use it in any application for any industry we are currently already serving with our standard products that are mined. But the challenge always will be cost, of course. It depends then heavily on the process, on how the product was produced, and again, also maybe also on quality parameters and regulations.
Okay, and Jannicke?
Well, yeah, definitely. These CDR contracts were one of the backbones in our business case, and it's basically that is driving. This is, in addition to, of course, being something we should do and something that we have to do, etc. This is business, and we have to be able to make a business case out of these projects. If not, they're not going to fly. So the CDR revenues are extremely important, and the additionality principle when it comes to the finance side is also it's also stressed by the buyers, that there needs to be an additionality, that they need to see that the deals that they're making is actually making these projects happen. So it's definitely a vital part of these projects moving forward. And that was also my point with the transport and storage contracts, that if you don't have that transport and storage, at least a plan, or most hopefully a contract, then it's also difficult to actually get these contracts signed, because then you're not considered mature enough. So it's all kind of a circle that needs to develop in parallel.
And is there any value for these companies in things like green product premiums or cost savings, or even the idea that this is mitigating against the risk of tighter climate regulations, or are those just sort of airy-fairy concepts that sound good in a sustainability report? Is there any way that those benefits of CDR can can be monetized in some way? And if so, is that something that you guys as providers or industrial companies have anything to do with? So start with you, Jannicke.
I think actually with our industry, we see this as also an area that we need to pay attention to, because now everybody's turning towards the biogenic waste, because that's where the value is. And with the fossil waste, only comes with a cost. It's CO2 taxes and ETS, etc. And I think this is a red flag that we should pay attention to, because our core societal task is to treat residual waste, waste that cannot be sorted out and recycled, waste that has no alternative treatment. And if the whole industry starts to turn towards only biogenic waste and nobody wants to treat the fossil waste, then we have a challenge. So that's actually something that we are looking into and that we need to look into also with regards to policy and regulation, that there must be incentives in place also to deal with the fossil waste, and it has to be the producer of all this fossil waste, all these fossil plastics, that actually pays the full price of dealing with the waste, and that includes the handling of the CO2. So that's a regulatory issue that I think we will need to pay a lot of attention to going forward.
And if these companies are going to have to deal with that full cost, is there a way for them to turn that waste into new products? So should they be looking at, I don't know, chemical recycling or something like that?
Well, I think with the waste that ends up in our kind of plants, waste incineration, that's waste that has already been sorted. So right. What is recyclable should have been sorted out. Chemical recycling is early phase, and there's a lot of challenges connected to that as well, in particular energy use. But that will probably also develop. So maybe that will look different in 10 to 15 years. But for now, waste incineration with energy recovery is by far the most sustainable treatment for this residual waste.
Sure, okay. And are there areas where we're seeing a clear commercial logic emerge for integrating CDR into operations as part of a long-term industrial strategy to deal with these emissions? Michel?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, maybe Lisa can further elaborate, but I guess, I mean, it's also about circularity, right? So if we are talking about side streams, also in mineral production or processes that end up with a mineral side stream that usually cannot be incinerated, so it has to be deposited somewhere, landfilled usually. The incentive, of course, on the one hand is you can create an additional value if these materials are fit for CDR pathways. While at the same time, of course, there is also increasing pressure on depositing or even creating side streams. And so this is kind of a secondary value that you have at the same time by avoiding a side stream that has to be deposited and is watched as let's say, waste rather than a resource for another application.
Lisa, have you got anything to add to that?
I would say we do not change anything about the use cases through our carbonation, so through the CO2 storage in the mineral waste material. However, we see that some of our partners, especially in Switzerland, where a lot of the demolition concrete is reused for the production of new concrete, there some of our partners are able to ask a green premium or win tenders because the CO2 was stored in it. If we look at the Swiss case, I would say across all the CDR we produce in Switzerland, maybe 5% of the CDR are sold with the product as a green premium. We hope that this will increase in the future. But on the other side, in other jurisdictions, like across Europe, I would say the vast majority of mineral waste, of demolition concrete, for example, ends up in road construction. So there it's then the public hand would need to pay for this green premium. Yeah. And then talking maybe besides the economic scope, we have some partners, and again, I would say this is a niche, it's not the standard, but we have some partners where we could improve the quality of their material through the carbonation, or we could improve the processes of their recycling process. So for example, we have one partner that washes their material before they put it into use to improve the quality of the material. And before our carbonation process, they were always encountering a lot of foam building during this washing process, which disrupted a lot their value chain. And through the carbonation, the foam building decreased massively. So they really need our process now for their value chain. And obviously this is the prettiest case, but it's not the standard.
Sure. And in terms of, this is to Michel and Lisa again, in terms of you as companies, you both mentioned that you're fairly small scale at the moment. How do you see the market growing and your companies developing? Do you think that this is a sector where we're going to see lots of consolidation and we're going to get some sort of mega CDR conglomerates, or is it always going to be fairly small scale, do you think? And also, will it be focused on particular use cases, or will we get companies that cover the whole range of CDR removals that we've talked about? So, sorry, bit of a... might need to talk to your CEO as well.
Well, I can imagine, I mean, it depends strongly on the application, I could imagine, right? Some of your customers might already be very big companies, despite having maybe small localized operations, whereas others are naturally, by the nature how they are, small companies. And so, for providers of CDR solutions, I'm not sure, might very well be that there is also consolidation, and of course, through scaling effects, it's more efficient. But I have the feeling that the customer base won't be changed by this. I mean, strongly depending, of course, on the CDR pathways. Talking about wastewater, I mean, you're locally bound to do what you are doing anyway. The infrastructure is given, for instance. If you're capturing CO2, transporting it somewhere, maybe there you will have different pathways or different setups, yeah.
Sure. Anything to add, Lisa?
I mean, if I look currently at the policy scheme in Europe, I feel the focus is really on larger BECCS project. This is also one of the reasons we want to shift more and more into this direction to receive some of this funding and help us to get to this drought period of not enough demand at the moment. So yes, I would say at the moment I fear that many smaller scale projects will not be able to endure this rather difficult time we are in. And I hope we can be a bit more technology agnostic going forward.
Sure, okay. Well, let's move on to the policy side then, and look at how we can shift policy from treating CDR as a separate climate instrument to embedding it within an industrial decarbonisation strategy that helps to drive deployment in the hard-to-abate sectors that need this so much. So what policy mechanisms are most effective in driving the adoption of CDR within heavy industry? Is it targets or carbon pricing, permitting reform, or targeted incentives? And Tibor, I'll start with you.
So I would say all of the above. I think we need to stack our instruments. I think we've seen in the earlier discussion about the ETS stack, ETS alone is not going to be the solution. It's going to be one major part of it. I think we shouldn't forget that the ETS, and I think Marina made it quite clear that the goal of the ETS is to reduce emissions in our industries. And so CDRs is going to come in there, but is the ETS on its own going to be enough to stimulate that demand? I think we need to be cautious, and I think we need to go beyond that. We need to think about other options that we have on the table, such as You mentioned targets. I think that separate targets or CDR for novel CDR can really be an important addition to the framework and give some long-term visibility, some long-term stability to projected CDR demand. So national targets can be one aspect, but we also need to bridge the gap until CDR becomes cost competitive or is covered by ETS. So de-risking instruments, carbon contracts with difference, reverse auctions, we have to take in that direction, but obviously that is a short-term solution.
And should any of these things should there be industry-specific policies, or is a blanket policy enough to drive money to where it needs to go?
I think there is an opportunity to think industrial policy and CDR policy together. So especially in the hard-to-abate industries, where we have these overlaps, we have waste incinerators that have half of their emissions are energetic nature. So we need to further think about how we can integrate CDR into that industrial policy. Same in the cement and lime industries. There is a chance that this could become climate neutral in the future if corrected, if implemented in the right way.
Yeah. Rasha, from your point of view, what do you think the answer is?
I think I echo a bit what he said, that there is no single silver bullet. It comes as a package of things that works together. There is example of tax credit, like the US 45Q, that now is the best example, but also working in the MRV and standards. But in a personal favorite for me is green public procurement. Government is the biggest, the single biggest procurer of construction material globally. In some countries can go up to 60% in some countries. So if you embed it, in public procurement policies that, in carbon embedded removal in there, that will create signal for the market and will drive demand. So, in UNIDO, we work with green public procurement, but more for reduction of emission, for low carbon products. And this is something that as well we look to work forward with governments to also establish it.
And to what extent are these policies starting to happen, or things like MRV and standards? Is there work going on in that, or is it like the rest of the industry at a fairly early stage?
I think it's still early stage. There is, countries that maybe Tibor will speak more on in EU and Germany specifically. But there is countries. I think the UK is planning to add it to their ETS. Generally, like Canada has a lot as well on credits for that was added. In emerging economies, unfortunately, it's still really early stages. Kenya is one of the countries that it's picking up on this, on DAC activities, but just still the challenges is still there, and it will require time for emerging economies to pick up on this as well.
And Tibor, from a European point of view, are we any further ahead?
I think in a way maybe yes, because I think governments have understood that there is a need for CDR, and instead of asking the question why, we're now asking the question how and then how much. And I think there is a kind of a stock take going on. We're looking at what do we have, when our auctions considering our industrial infrastructure, and how much CO2, for example, could be captured, how much biogenic CO2 could be captured in existing industry, and also it can be a cost-effective way of producing CDR by looking at where do we integrate it into this team.
Sure. And from an industry point of view, are there particular policies that would really help your companies to sell this to your customers? Lisa?
Yeah, definitely. We look very much at the ETS integration, again, I think there our solution specifically will not be one of the first ones that will be integrated. And then there is still the question about the price. Our costs are way bigger than the price we see currently for ETS allowances. Procurement through the government is something I believe is very effective. So we have seen this also in Switzerland, that through a public-private institution, 50 million Swiss francs were invested in CDR solutions in Switzerland. I think this was a big pull for many solutions, and I think it also generates trust then for buyers on the voluntary market to step in. Yeah, and then we can also think about existing schemes like sustainable aviation fuel, if it could make sense to integrate CDR there, or other schemes which already exist. Maybe we do not need to invent the wheel completely new, but can just see how CDR could fit in it.
Sure. Michel, from your point of view?
Yeah, I can only agree. Maybe the only thing I would add, it was mentioned this morning very briefly, since the conference is not about CCU or US, but also maybe a revision or changes in how the utilization is evaluated or treated might make also a difference, since again some products might actually some carbonated products might still be part of the value chain, and by this, even though it's only an intermediate storage, but still might contribute and basically allow the use of such products, maybe at least for a little bit of a premium more than it's currently happening. Like Lisa said, there is a few, I guess, front runners or forerunner companies that are willing to pay a premium, but for actual products, and especially commodity products, this is more the exception than the norm.
Sure. And Jannicke, you're in a fairly heavily regulated industry anyway, and in a country that is in many ways ahead of the game on this. Are there extra things that you would like to see to encourage this?
Well, I think a clear framework that is maturing as we speak is important. To have very clear criteria on permanence and additionality and the sustainability criteria, etc. To have these common overarching outlines will help. And obviously, I don't think we won't get the volume that we need until we see a compliance market. So the integration in the ETS is an important step. Ideally, I would wish for CDR to have a higher price than the fossil allowances to stimulate this market and to basically have the price that we need to realize these projects. So we need to stack funds, we need public support, we need CDR, and we need a stable and overarching framework for this whole area.
Great, okay. And I'm going to ask you all now, if there was one barrier that could be removed to help grow this market, what would be the one thing you would want to see completely removed from the landscape? I'll start with you, Rasha.
That's a complicated question. Look at only one. I don't know if there is a single, I think personally, I've been talking about standards and MRVs, and that's for me what I think. If it cannot be measured, it cannot be verified, you cannot build the business case. So that, I think, what I would like to see is having a strong, MRV system and better standards and accounting.
Sure. Jannicke?
And then I'll still go with the compliance market. We need this to be, there has to be a compliance to really drive the volumes.
Yeah, Michel?
Yes, maybe just then rephrased in a different way, right? Costs.
Yeah.
And then, ideally the costs that are associated with any additional technology, that's naturally right. We add processes or products, and this comes with a cost. And so mitigation of these costs in whatever way, we heard it this morning, you could be thinking about where the carbon is actually coming from that we have to put away again. but some way of covering these additional costs to make it cost neutral or ideally even cost positive or value positive.
Yeah. Lisa?
I've been in this industry for over 5 years, and we have talked a lot about standardization of standards and certification standards, and I think we have gone a long way also with CRCF. So I think this is not an excuse anymore to not go further. I think the one thing is the use case. What is the use case of CDR? So it's again the demand side, and this is the biggest problem, and if we don't solve it, it will be tough for this industry.
Yeah. Tibor?
To add to what Lisa said, I think we need to make sure that we de-risk investments in these CDR applications as soon as possible to get those first projects moving, to show that CDR can create value. And I think we've talked a lot about that in Gerner, and that there is a chance for it to create that value. And I think we need to make that visible. We need to have people talk about that and have the public discourse on CDR shift in that direction.
So you think if you get these pilot projects up and running, that will create a momentum for other companies to get involved?
Yeah, I think that we need the value chain. We need to coordinate the value chain of CDR. I think to achieve that, we need to get the stone based.
Yeah. Do you think that value chain is clear? Is it well understood what each stage of that is, or is part of the problem that not necessarily the linkages between the different parts of the value chain, and some of them might not even realise they are part of the value chain?
I think it depends a bit on the CDR method that we're talking about. I think in some aspects, maybe on the CCS-based CDR, we have a clear idea of what the value chain is. Doesn't make it easier to coordinate the risks along the value chains, but we do know the challenges. And I think that there are some areas where it is more difficult to see the value chains and to create the linkages, to clean them, to create that value. But I think we have some canvas here that show that it is possible to create those linkages.
Great, thank you very much. Right, we're going to open it up for questions now. So if there are any questions, there is a mic, I believe. Please say who you are and where you're from, and if you're directing your question to anyone in particular, please let us know. So any questions?
I had a question around kind of sectoral obligations, and if thinking beyond, and maybe this is mostly directed at Lisa, but thinking beyond kind of the ETS, is there anything in the cement and construction sector from a regulation standpoint where you can see that would also help unlock kind of a niche component of demand?
I mean, our dream would be that there would be a regulation that X amount of CO2 would always need to be stored in this mineral waste streams. So demolition concrete, originally it originates from burning cement, so it was originally up the value chain and an emitting compound, so it would make sense that you would include a regulation that says some part of the CO2 needs to be stored again in this material. So this would be great. However, we see that regulations are very country specific. They take a lot of time. Like, for example, using recycled materials in concrete is still very difficult in Germany, for example, and they are trying to change these regulations now since many, many years, but yeah, it's just a difficult fight, I would say. And the ETS integration would just be, for all our projects across Europe, a potential solution, whereas the other one would probably always be very country-specific.
Hi, my name is Scott Braune with GE Vernova. Question about reaching FID on the project in Oslo. What did that capital stack look like to reach FID, and what were some of the challenges you encountered? What were the sources of equity or debt for that project? And can you describe some of the expectations from investors in terms of the return threshold?
So I'm not sure I grasped everything, but you asked about how we basically finance the project.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's several financial sources. We did receive some state funding through the Longship project, both on CapEx and on 10 years or an OpEx period. The city of Oslo also invested in the project, about 200 million euros. That's an investment, so they are basically expecting to have revenues on that investment. And then the remaining part, the company part, was financed through avoided CO2 taxes on the fossil part, and then CDR revenues on the biogenic part. And that, again, was contracts with Frontier, 100,000 tons over 2 years, and Microsoft, 1.1 million tons over 10 years. So that's the financial scheme. If that answered your question?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Hi. So my question is about residual sectors. So if you look at aviation, agriculture, and industry, I'm wondering, for people making the investments, if there are any questions about whether to go down the path of emissions mitigation versus CDR. I think we all start with the goal that emissions mitigation is where we should start first. But for people making the investment decisions, I wonder how they are thinking about it, because I don't think we have policy certainty with CDR. So yeah, if you have any insights on that. I hope my question was clear. Or if I...
So I think you're asking, should people be focusing on emissions mitigation first and then moving to CDR,
So
or doing both at the same time?
Yeah, if we take aviation as an example in the UK, there's clearly a sustainable aviation mandate. So for companies, for aviation companies that are going down the path of looking at emission mitigation technologies, I'm wondering how they think about CDR and how that fits into their, into their plans in the long term. And if they are seeking policy certainty from the government in terms of making decisions about where to invest.
Anyone have any?
I mean, we have collaborated with an aviation company in Switzerland, and their strategy of net zero relies on sustainable aviation fuel, then obviously new technology for the aviations, and then CDR. And currently they focus a lot on the first two, but they also start piloting the third part, the CDR part. But I think sustainable aviation fuel is also still in the very early beginnings. It's pretty much the same as CDR. So I personally think from a regulation perspective, we should be more agnostic there. On sustainable aviation fuel, we have regulations to grow this field, but I think it would make sense personally that CDR would be integrated into it, because we shouldn't bet on one thing and then do not help the other thing to grow. I think it's too early. We do not know which one will be able to scale better or at a more cost-efficient way. Yeah,
I agree. And this also goes back to the equation with the keynote speaker, that it basically, whether we remove or we reduce, it's all about how much CO2 we're actually emitting into the atmosphere. So I agree. I think we need to do everything that we can, and not basically put all apples in one bag. Yeah, we need all these measures, and we need them now. So basically, move forward with everything we can is, I think, the only way we can go.
There was a question down the front.
Hi, everyone. What? Oh, yeah, great. I think it's kind of with you. Just a question, because I guess something that comes up a lot in the VCM along with buyers is this delivery risk. And, there's been experiences where they've had, credits that they will create an offtake, and then when it comes to the delivery time, the credits don't get delivered. And with this integration of removals into the compliance market, how do you envision us dealing with delivery risk in this sort of compliance-based system? Do you think we'd be using something quite similar to VCMs? Or, because I guess there needs to be an aspect of predictability, but if projects are not delivering removals at the time that they need to, how would you manage that risk in this framework?
Tibor, is that one you can...
I'm not an expert on the VCM. I think there you have some mechanisms to remediate this risk. I do think that it is a real problem. I think if we look at the project pipeline in the past, about 1/5 of projects have actually realized what they were planning to do. So I think it is a risk that we have to be aware of. How the Commission thinks about it with integrating removals into the ETS, I cannot say. But yeah, it is a real issue.
And Rasha, do you think that that it's more of a problem for projects in the Global South for all of the reasons that you outlined earlier?
Can you say it again?
Do you think that in terms of that deliverability of credits, is that more challenging in the Global South because of the lack of market infrastructure?
Yes, I think we see it across different industries and different technologies. Global South countries to countries also vary, but there is much more support needed there as well in establishing the market. There is even in technologies that it's established in the Global North where you still need to invest a lot in there. So there is a lot of work that comes in the Global South with needing for skills development and technology development. And maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but in the Global North, I feel like technologies are there. It's not a technology issue. It's more in terms of investments and policy kind of framework and market creation.
Yeah. Yeah, over there.
Yeah, thank you. Rodolphe Nicole from the European Lime Association. It's surprisingly a question for you, Rasha, because I have many for all the others, but I'm going to have face-to-face discussion with them. You mentioned the fact that there is a kind of a lack of MRVs to really go more in depth in the Global South. Are you exploring other ways, actually, than MRV and a very, I would say, Global North-centric approach? I'm thinking about, using, for instance, emission factors from the IPCC database or that kind of things to implement that regarding, for instance, carbon farming, carbonation, or that kind of things that could be perhaps easiest way to move forward and to scale up in those areas.
I think generally everyone is establishing MRVs just because for their NDCs everyone is putting it. How they're doing it or the calculations or the factors change from a country to country. And again, it's just, I don't want to mention any country here, but like there is countries where you will go with lower, infrastructure or lower adaptability. And there is ones that has better MRVs, but still, in a way, even when we talk about technologies, every country like to be within the context of the country. There is a lot of pride as well in not wanting to just, follow. And you'll be surprised how skeptical a lot of the countries on, whether carbon removal or carbon capture, that this is, Global North things, it's too expensive, we don't want to deal with it, we don't need it, we'll find another solution. So country to country, as a UNIDO, we try to adapt as much as possible and, make the case and bring partners. Like, I've been in one country where when we started talking about cement, decarbonization with, the different wide technologies, they refused to talk to anything related to carbon capture, carbon removal. Within 2 years, they started talking about it just because, you bring that experience. You take them to see, the sites, you take them, do that knowledge exchange, and they're like starting to think about how this could be from the context of Vietnam. It will take time, but I think the good thing is, while here you're already industrialized and going to decarbonize, there they're still building, and they can start the process from the beginning without needing to decarbonize.
I've got time for one more question. Over there. I don't know where. Yeah, we have a mic.
Thank you. This is Lennart Grün from Leibniz University Hannover, and my question would go to you, Lisa. I was thinking about the issue of double counting, and I was asking myself, if you go to these industrial cement companies, are they aware of the issue that they basically, because as I understand it, if you sell these carbon credits then to other companies to decarbonize or get offsets, these cement producers can't really claim the environmental benefit for them. Are they aware of that, or is it an issue of communication still?
No, so we do not work with cement producers, but with recycler. So you have the cement production, then you have the concrete producer that produces the concrete, so cement mixed with sand and gravel. A building is built, 50 years later it's teared down, it goes to a recycler, and this is the entity we are working with. But to your question, yes, we have collaboration agreements with all our partners, usually 5 to 10 years, where we agree on a certain share of the credits that they are allowed to sell as a premium. So usually it's around 20%. And quarterly, they mention to us how much of these CDR were sold with the product. And these CDR are then retired in the registry on behalf of the recycler. So we only sell the credits on the voluntary carbon market that are still available, and we're not able to be sold with the premium.
Thank you.
Any more questions? We are over time now, so I'll take this opportunity to thank our fantastic panel and thank you all for your time and your questions. Thanks very much.